Hi, this is Sharon Weinstein from Lead for Excellence. What a great day it is to talk about innovation. For those of us within the healthcare space, innovation is a constant. From the days when we jerry-rig products ourselves to the days in which we actually have real innovative products that are transforming practice and safety and outcomes. The pandemic has had a huge impact on healthcare product and service fulfillment, and the crisis is a reminder that it is during times of disruption, such as these, that some of the greatest innovations happen. In this session, we'll address innovating during a pandemic, educating during a pandemic, and the clinical side, vascular access management. Assess, analyze, and innovate. Prioritizing innovation today is the key to unlocking post-crisis growth. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended nearly every aspect of our life, from the personal, how people live and work, to the professional, how companies interact with their clients, with their services, and certainly how supply chains deliver those products. Our presenters today represent the best of innovation for products and service. Allow me to introduce Lance Baily, founder and managing director of Healthy Simulation. Amy Cowperthwait, founder and CEO of Avkin, and Judith LaJoie, who is the chief nurse for medical solutions and outcomes for Becton Dickinson. Let's start with you, Lance. Please share your perspective.
Yeah, so what we're seeing through healthysimulation.com right now with regards to our global audiences who are specifically interested in healthcare simulation and the latest technologies for education, training, and patient safety performance improvements is just a real demand and a need for remote and distance-based learning opportunities for obvious reasons, right? Clinical rotations have been shut down, campus classrooms have been canceled. And so even the laggards when it comes to the technology adoption scale have been forced to deal with the fact that we can't meet in person to provide for these clinical hours as much as we have in the past, right? So it's forced their hand. They finally have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide when it comes to new technologies. And so, you know, we've seen a massive increase in terms of obviously COVID-19 related resources, in terms of specialized training. We just saw a new, for example, report about a new VR PPE simulator that's taken off. So a lot of technology specific to that, and then also remote distance-based telesimulation, and is a buzzword that has really been seen a lot more happening out there around the world in terms of this particular community. So in that sense, we've seen, I think, a lot of these kind of requirements for enabling things to happen through a network and a system for obvious reasons, right? We have learners who are stuck at home. We've also seen task trainers that have been skills-based and can be literally mailed to groups, or for helping to deal with scheduling when it comes to individual sim labs, and then scheduling learners so that they can come in one at a time to engage with a process and a learning process where the hands-on skills-based portion of it must be assessed or tested in some other way. So those are the major things that we're seeing.
Okay, that's interesting, because when I think of sim, I think of the days in which we used to practice on one another. The sim models were not really models. We think back to Annie, are you okay? Annie, are you okay? And I remember my colleagues in the former Soviet Union changed their name and called them Misha and Masha for the male and the female versions of those mannequins. But we certainly have come a long way. And really, sim has become a really important part of our lives. Amy, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I would definitely say I echo what Lance was saying about the adoption curve, but really as clinicals began to shut down and as we really started to have to innovate as to how we were going to be providing proper education for our nursing students, what I began to start thinking about is these students are going to graduate and not really have that hands-on experience that they would have gotten through their clinical performance or in a simulation setting. So our focus was really on helping hospital systems with onboarding these new graduates, whether it's nurses, respiratory therapists, physicians that really haven't had as much clinical learning practice. Our focus was really on how can we help them make sure that patients are safe. So by focusing on improving patient safety outcomes through simulation learning, that really informed what we did through COVID to help our readership, our customer base. And in kind of what Lance was talking about earlier with the telesimulation experiences, converting all of our simulation experiences, or as many as possible that didn't include a lot of psychomotor skills, to the telehealth simulation experience by training SPs, which is something that, you know, we do all the time. But really then by training those SPs, they can then become the patients in a telehealth simulation experience, so that the students are at least learning in the cognitive and affective domains.
I like that. That certainly has taken us away from see one, do one, teach one, which is the
Absolutely.
medical school model. We really are moving forward. So interestingly, the COVID-19 pandemic is already inspiring innovation. Obviously, from what you both said, at companies as they adapt to new ways to operate and to serve consumers. And innovation can take many forms. We know that it can be as big as the development of new products and services, or as small as a pivot in marketing strategy. I'd like you to pick up on that, Judy, and tell us what your perspective is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as an industry partner, we're always striving to understand pain points. We're always striving to understand what are people having trouble with, right? I think we saw through COVID-19 how nurses were at their innovative best. We saw them figuring out how to use securement devices that should be on an arm to use on a door frame to get tubing off the floor, right? To really try to make sure that those lines stayed clean. I think that when it's safe to do so, we need to hit the pause button, and we need to go and take a really good deep dive look into everything that happened and go back and figure out, what are we missing the mark on? What do we need to help develop and innovate on that can really help drive excellent outcomes, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to provide healthcare workers whatever they need to give care safe and efficiently, so that they still have that excellent outcome, but also want to help a hospital not break the bank doing that, right? So if we think about the triple aim, how do we continue on being a partner, making sure that we're able to provide goods and services and solutions, right? So not just here, use this widget because this widget is great. It's let's understand why your hospital needs this widget, right? If you're not meeting a standard or guideline rooted in evidence-based practice, to kind of go back to make sure that we're always a partner, right? So it's not just being, hey, I have to go buy this item from that guy. I really want to be a true partner with healthcare to really drive innovation and to drive the continuation of evidence-based practice.
Right. I like that, because we are, in fact, all partners. We are, more than ever before, all in this together. Amy, I have a question for you. You witnessed students struggling with the human element. Students practice procedures on plastic models, but their education never really included the challenges of communicating with a live human patient and that patient experience during their greatest time of need. What do you see as the future? Where do you see this going?
As far as the communication pieces of this?
Yes.
Yeah, so I really, again, to think about where we are generationally, the new graduates, or those that are the rising workforce, grew up with a phone in their hands. They walk down the road, you know, looking at their iPhone, and they're actually teaching courses now about facial expressions and how to interpret what those facial expressions mean, so that they can understand what a person or a patient is responding to. So as far as the future, I really see the importance and the need for this generation of learners to be able to understand how to communicate face to face, so that as they're applying what they're learning in their didactic education or in their clinical learning, they're not stressed just even to walk into the room and talk to someone. So that's really where I see, as far as the future or the needs, and really where we're filling that need is so important and so valuable, both in the academic arena as well as in, you know, the onboarding or the new healthcare sector.
I think that that's really important, because those of us who have exposure to young people in the teenage space realize that having a conversation is sitting next to one another, texting from one phone to another phone.
Yeah.
There is no pick up the phone and talk to anyone. Communication doesn't happen in that way. So I think that it has changed so dramatically that some of the moves that you're taking are really very critical. I have a colleague who indicated that within their healthcare system, they had been hacked, and there were no electronic records within any of the 11 or 13 system hospitals. What that posed was a problem for those who were under age 35 who had never seen a paper record. They had no idea what to do. They had no idea what to enter.
Yeah.
They didn't really understand what age they were in. Lance, let me switch gears and take it to you. Tell me about your digital media background and how that influenced your work with SIM.
Absolutely. So, I went to film school first and foremost, UC Santa Cruz for film and digital media production, right? And then I went down and I worked in Hollywood for a bunch of years. I think I did everything but hair and makeup in terms of production. And so when I got a little tired of Hollywood, I went back to school and became an EMT and a firefighter and learned about simulation. And I mean, it had a direct impact in terms of my ability to understand how simulation worked. Well, we were basically creating little scenes, right? We had a script or a scenario. We had our standardized patients, our lead actors. We had our Confederates as our background actors. We had, sound and music coming in with overhead audio cues. We had hair and makeup for moulage. So there's a lot of similarities between filmmaking, a mix of documentary and narrative here in this situation where we don't know what we're going to capture. And so we have to try to get things from a lot of different angles and think about them in terms of creating a space for this, a safe space for this dialogue to take place with the interview subjects where they're willing to talk about themselves and be analyzed and reviewed and kind of, put inside of a box in a sense. And then also a narrative where we're trying to control some of the discussions or the learning objectives that are taking place. And so, I think that has really helped me to kind of understand and to share how we can create more realistic simulation experiences. Amy and AVCAN, they're doing that with regards to adding levels of realism to standardized patients in terms of what you can do, right? So I think it's everything that we can do to add more of those types of steps to create that realistic experience. And then also it's really helped and supported my my work with healthysimulation.com in terms of media production and understanding, how to create bite-sized and useful pieces of information. I think that documentary filmmaking also kind of led itself towards that, not only with our YouTube videos, which have been watched over 2 million times, but also just with regards to presenting that material in a way that can be understood quickly about what's being conveyed here. Because we also obviously know that healthcare providers are very busy. They have a lot to deal with. And so we want to try to pack as much important information as possible into an article for them and get straight to the point. What do they need to take away from what we're trying to educate them so they can move their simulation program further faster?
That's interesting because I saw that you had a viral campaign in 2017 that went truly viral with millions of hits. And it was about preterm simulator Paul. So that was in 2017 and very innovative for the time. How was the response during COVID? Is it as strong? And truly, it's clear to me that your media background really adds incredible value.
Yeah, well, it's I think it's what's fascinating about the simulation community and the industry right now is there's so few professional educational degree programs out there. There's a few master's degree, I think 1 or 2 PhD programs. I know there's some associates, but I mean, we're talking, I can count them all maybe on both hands, right? And so in that sense, we're all kind of sidestepping into the industry from other disciplines. Now, obviously, a lot of us are coming from healthcare, right? We're just kind of expanding our educational or kind of clinical roles into these new technology domains. But, through SimGhost and Healthy Sim and other groups out there, we're seeing that there's also just kind of pulling from other industry verticals, right? I came from audio, video, digital media technologies, while the person next to me at a SimGhost event could have 20 years of paramilitary experience, and the person next to us have 20 years of IT experience. And so I think we all have to try to find ways of coming together to share our backgrounds and our information. That's again going to take us further and faster because now we can all throw our 2 cents into the hat, walk away with $1 each, in terms of those knowledge opportunities. So I think, seeking out, especially, I mean, it's difficult during COVID, obviously, to meet face-to-face and go to our sim lab, but this is normally how the learning process is taking place for those that are new to the community and to the industry.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. Judy, I want to talk to you for a moment. Vascular access is now universal, and hospitalized patients need infusion technology more than ever before. So do non-hospitalized patients, because let's face it, they won't let people into hospitals unless there's a real need. Does predictive analysis play a role in terms of access management, and what have you found in terms of the impact?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I just want to first acknowledge everybody on the front line, right? Especially those on vascular access teams, whether they're inpatient or outpatient, because I think these people, these patients were the sickest of the sick. And it really took skill in order to access them correctly and efficiently, and hopefully in a way that sustained them for their entire course of treatment. And I think it really calls out the need for specialized therapy, right? To have specialists in this realm, so that we can, I think as we see the population change and we know how sick the population is, we know that that comes with a level of difficult access. And I think it's unfair to expect everybody in a hospital to be able, or in an outpatient situation as well, to be able to access them appropriately. I think that's where predictive analytics comes into it. We need that data to tell us who needs to be identified as difficult access. And I think when we arm people with that information, it's not playing roulette and hoping for a great outcome, right? We can be very focused and direct to pick the right device for the right patient with this nirvana, if you will, of one patient, one stick, one encounter.
Interesting. So with a focus on PPE and supply chain, has this challenged you at BD to do more with less, to create more and to deliver more quickly?
So I think what it's challenged us to do is to, sometimes when you're a really, really big organization, you work slow because there's a lot of different channels for things to go through. I think COVID-19 has helped us break out of that shell. I think it's helped us put our foot on the gas and not take it off until we've reached our common goal. I think understanding the limitations that we see in inpatient and outpatient has made us change and focus. How do we deliver education differently? We can't get in, I think Lance said it before, we're closed out, right? We can't get into facilities. How do we get the information that clinicians need? Maybe a clinician walks into a unit they're not familiar with or an environment they're not familiar with. How do we help them understand products that they've never touched before without us being formally in front of them? So we've been able to flex and stand up different training and education modalities to meet that need. So it's been, kudos to our senior management who basically said, do whatever you need to do to help customers who help patients. And that has been incredibly rewarding work to do because we finally could go at 100 miles an hour and not stop until we got to the destination.
Exactly. But let me ask a question of each of you. What if the new normal, and we've pretty much adjusted to what's happening now? I've heard some of my colleagues say that this new normal or next normal will proceed for perhaps the next couple of years. What if the new normal becomes the next normal? How will we adjust?
Right. Well, I'll go first on that one. Just, I think that this is a catalyst opportunity for a lot of healthcare organizations. So on healthysimulation.com, we recently launched a webinar series ourselves, just specifically with regards to, the types of content that we discussed there, and had a great webinar with Dr. Kelly Bryant, who's the executive director of the simulation program out of Columbia University School of Nursing. And they've shared with us about all the new technologies just that they brought into the program just in the last 6 months. And it was incredible that they were able to pivot their program that quickly with all of these new technologies. And the exciting thing was that she said to our audience that, some of those things are going to stay even after COVID, right? They're that good and they're just more effective and more efficient. So, the adage, when a door closes, a window opens. I think really this is an opportune time. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to get past those laggards who, we're talking early majority, late majority laggards, all of them from the phase that we see ourselves in terms of the simulation space and the innovation space. We're early adopters, we're innovators, right? We're all at different levels of that scale, but here we are with this unique golden opportunity to really increase the number of technologies and methodologies that are being utilized here now in a way that we've never had the opportunity to before. And I think what's really important about what we're doing right now is to keep track of the data as much as possible, right? See and learn how these new technologies are impacting ROI for your programs in the short term, because once COVID is kind of dealt with and over, and yes, that's probably going to take, Bill Gates and Microsoft are saying it's going to be end of 2021 before this is handled in developed countries, end of 22 at the earliest for undeveloped countries. And so we've got a long runway here still where we're going to be dealing with this. And so keeping track of how these new technologies are impacting programs, I think are going to be important, because at some point the administrators are going to come knocking and they're going to say, okay, that's all over. We'd like to cut this, this, and this. Let's get back to what we were doing before. Well, wait a minute. These two systems over here, yeah, maybe that one, but these two have increased our efficiency tenfold, and here's the data to prove it, right? So I think just making sure to keep track of what we're doing and what we're using and how that can have a big impact for our programs as in the long run. I think that's a key takeaway from the current situation we find ourselves in.
I think that's true, because history has shown that crises drives innovation. So when you talk about, yes, it's increased our productivity, it's probably also enhanced our outcomes.
Right.
And prioritizing innovation today is the key to unlocking our post-crisis growth. So Amy, do you want to touch on that? What if new becomes next?
Yeah, so I actually was thinking, touching on what Lance said about the idea of the new normal or the next normal and how simulation impacts that. To think about the fact that it's not just about COVID, it's also about diversity and inclusion. It's also about mental health. There is so much work that needs to be done, and not just mental health from the patient's perspective, but also from the resiliency of our frontline providers, as Judy was talking about earlier. I think we really need to be able to focus on how do we make sure that we are addressing these topics and these issues with providers before they get faced with it at the bedside, talking about, social injustice, talking about potentially some, diversity issues that are a difficult way to, how do you open up that conversation and have that conversation with someone that's different than you? How do you also talk about care? Because we know that when there are crises or when there is a healthcare crisis, typically culture and personal beliefs come out much stronger. Mental health is an ever-present issue. It was a rising issue and it's been out there, but it's even more prevalent now than it was before. How do we help to work with people how do we identify people that are at risk? How do we make sure that we are communicating that with them in a way that's right? And I think that also is such a perfect opportunity for the telehealth simulation experiences, or again, the inclusion of these live participants that are trained to be the simulated patients and family members for these experiences. It really adds to a richness that we wouldn't have tried it before, probably in a telehealth virtual environment, but we're trying it now and we are seeing very big impacts. And I think Judy was also talking about the data, but looking at that data, I think Lance was this too, but we are doing evaluations on this all the time to make sure that it's meeting the learner's needs, and making sure that they're able to grow so that they are resilient when they get out there into the workforce, and so that they are able to identify people that are at risk and they are comfortable taking care of diverse populations of people in a way where these people are feeling that they are being cared for properly.
Judy, would you address new and next?
Yeah, so I was thinking both as Lance and Amy were talking about, and I think we need to take all of our learnings that we encountered. We have to go from reactive to proactive, right? So how do we take everything that we learned and switch it a little bit and now be proactive? Because I think that's where the data comes into it, right? So we need to collect as much data as possible, because what we learn from the data helps us to be proactive and takes us out of this constant reactive state. When we're in a reactive state, we're doing what we need to do to just get it done, right? But when we think about what can the data drive, right? The data should drive the next evidence-based practice. And how do we take that data and how do we learn? And like I said before, when it's safe to do so, how do we hit that pause button to really take that deep dive to assimilate everything together to then put us on a course of proactivity instead of being this constant reactive? Because reactive takes a long time. Reactive has a lot of cracks. Reactive can let a lot of things fall through those cracks. So how do we switch it? How do we, kind of flip the switch, if you will, and really start to use the data to our advantage to make sure that we're proactive.
Great. I'm going to, at this point, switch to takeaway messages. I'd like each of you to think about what strong takeaway message do you want our listening and viewing audience to know and to think about and perhaps to apply as it relates to your specific area. Lance, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so, I think the key takeaway here and the lessons being learned from COVID is obviously, I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think that's an obvious thing that, I think we need to incorporate. And so how does that come with regards to innovation? Well, why do hospitals not have chief innovation officers who are going around trying to figure out and deal with each department and hear from those people that are on the front lines and hear the ideas that they have for improving performance within their own programs and the departments that they run, right? Why is that not a key topic that we have on the discussion at the table every single day when we have a board meeting for these hospitals? So there's so many different ways that technologies and new innovations can motivate and change for real performance improvement. And why not grab that bull by the horns and just ride it, as opposed to, be forced to deal with it after the fact when there are emergencies or crises happening. And now we're trying to deal with these problems and these challenges without having the time that we can use to experiment, to explore, right? And fail fast. You're not going to get to, not every innovative solution is going to be a winner. That's part of what it means to be uncomfortable in the innovative kind of process. And that's why I think it's important to dedicate time and energy within an organization to a specific individual or team that is comfortable being in some place where they're going to fail. As an entrepreneur, I can't tell you how many projects have come and gone that just didn't hit home runs, right? Like Healthy Sim has been around for 10 years, but there's been other projects that only lasted 2. And so I think it's an important kind of note to think about that this is an area of a little bit of chaos and a little bit of challenge, but the rewards are great for those that are willing to bear down and continue to move forward with trying new things and seeing what works. And I think that people need to take away from this a new way of thinking in terms of incorporating some of that chaos a little bit goes a long way, right? If we just kind of invest in that early, it's going to pay in spades for not only crises like this, but just in general through our institutions.
Great. Amy, what's your takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is that what we think as far as institutional things that are tried and true and are never going to change, such as clinical learning experiences or hands-on experiences prior to actual practice, are not always going to be there. And the institutions, the academic institutions, have a responsibility to make sure that they are filling those lost opportunities with ones that are of value and that are really going to bring students to the level of graduation. But as well, hospital systems need to be aware of the fact that there is a potential for a struggle as these new graduates are entering the workforce, and they need to put things in place to make sure that their patients are safe and that the frontline workers are prepared and resilient to provide the care that's needed. So I think that there is so much out there to be done, and it's an exciting time. Obviously, all of us are struggling with some of the effects of COVID, but I think as far as being an innovator, this is a great time to be alive and to really be seeing what the opportunity is that's out there for us.
Great. And Judy?
So one of my favorite statements is insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And everybody thinks it came from Einstein. Einstein actually never said that. It came from a book by the name of Sudden Death by Rita Mae Brown. And I think it's really relevant because in hospitals, I think, especially as it relates to vascular access, we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, right? So we need to break that cycle. We need data to help us break that cycle. And I think it helps us, especially, in times of crisis, that we have to stop doing the same thing over and over again and think that we're going to get a different result, because we're only going to get the same result. So it's really taking data and evidence to drive to change, right? And I think that change, going back to what we were talking about before, makes us proactive. I think we have so much to learn from the COVID crisis. And I think I look forward to all that learning, because it's only going to help everybody get better. It's going to help our healthcare workers get better. It's going to make our institutions stronger. It's going to make us in industry smarter and being able to partner with healthcare. And it's going to, at the end of the rainbow, I think the person that benefits the most from it is the patient, because they're going to get the care they need when they need it and not have anything else untoward happen to them. So I think for me, that's the North Star that I really want to aspire to, is that we need, at the end of the day, always to think about how this affects the patient in the bed, because that's why we're all here and why we all get up and do what we do.
Exactly. I've always talked about healthcare being a business, but the difference between that and other businesses is that the commodity with which we deal is human lives and human happiness, neither of which should ever be jeopardized. I think that your takeaways were all very strong. It's helpful to have health system partners in innovation, because then you might be able to collaborate on innovation grants or for data gathering or for better insights across different populations. And you addressed that as well, Amy, when you talked about diversity and inclusion. Close collaboration with vendors can enable you to access cross-industry insights and apply their new technologies and solutions to healthcare. And you're right, each of you, at the end of the day, there's a patient in that bed, in that chair, in that home, and that individual is dependent upon each of us to do what is right, to bring them what is needed in terms of innovation and technology and safety, and to ensure a positive outcome. We owe it to them. We owe it to the families. And even more important than ever, we owe it to those professionals who are at the bedside, at the chair side, in the home, in the clinic, providing care and needing technology and innovation that's going to allow them to be their very best, to do the best that they possibly can, and to ensure that we really are caring where care matters most. I want to thank each of you for your perspectives on the innovation concept and how important that is as it relates to products and service. Thanks for being a part of our very important panel. I know that we'll get great reception as a result of this content, and I want to thank each of you for being with me today. Thanks very much for your contribution and for your commitment to the healthcare process, to patients, and to their outcomes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Sharon.
you.